breaking down that fraughtness. Things that were impossible a generation before started to become possible. And so peace has come to pass, a peace underpinned by this remarkable and formidable and very unique legal architecture. It's a legal architecture that is customized around the struggle that is and has been the struggle for peace on this island and between these islands. It's not a kind of peace that you can take and put in a basket and just take over to Gaza or take to Libya or take to any of the countries that are struggling currently for fundamental rights and freedoms. It's not that kind of peace. There may very well be aspects of the architectural, the growth of the architecture that are of human interest wherever peacemakers are gathered, but it's very, very customized around our own historic problems. And the most important thing to say about it, of course, that it is owned. It is owned by the overwhelming will of the people. It was tested in referenda. You didn't have a vote in those referenda, regrettably. 1998, one of the most formidable days in Irish history, when North and South, the people of both jurisdictions, went to the polls and they were asked the question whether they supported the Good Friday Agreement. And overwhelmingly they revealed that they did. The first time ever that people were able to reveal the kind of yesness, the generosity, the willingness to compromise, the willingness to say, yes, 90% of something is a hell of a lot better than 100% of nothing. And that is what they said on that day emphatically. And so we've arrived at a time now of growing peace that is actually very different from we've lived through other peace processes. It wasn't that people didn't try. People kept on trying in a whole lot of ways to bring about peace, to bring about justice, to bring about reconciliation, to bring about equality. And one after another, every effort met with, at best, partial success, but more generally with what looked like abject failure. Though even those abject failures all had within them the seed of information that helped to inform the next step. Everything that failed was something that told you, don't try that, try something else. So each piece of, even failures, had their lessons in them, their important and valuable lessons. And so we've arrived at a time now where I believe we're not looking at a process that is just an interruption of hostilities. We're actually looking at the laying of a completely new pathway, a new road, a road out of the past, away from the past, coherently out of the past, not a ring road that just keeps taking you back to where we all started. And that's something that will make a huge change to your lives, to the lives of your generation, to the options that you will have in your life, and also down the road, even now, to the opinions that you will hold, the opinions you will hold about the future of this island and the shape of it. It is, I think, the defining imprint of this, the most educated generation ever to inhabit this island, the most creative, the most willing to compromise intelligently and generously, the most determined to reveal the true power of democracy, the most determined that there would be mutual respect and parity of esteem. That imprint of this generation is peace. I know at the moment you mightn't be wickedly impressed by the creativity of this generation. You know, I can understand that, frankly, particularly on the economic front. I can understand that, and yes, it's atrocious and it's heartbreaking and so depressing and distressing. But believe you me, when the history books are written about this era, and when we have emerged, as we will, from this economic crisis, because we have formidable brain power, and we still have a huge number of strengths that will help us to get the heft and the push that we need to get through these difficult times. The thing that has eluded us for centuries, the issue of peace, is the one that will be one of the most extraordinary characteristics of this generation, the investment in peace, the imagination that went into it, the proof that by talking, by dialoguing, we were able to talk ourselves out of centuries of conflict and into a very, very different, fresh, new future. It's remarkable to think that the ambition for a united Ireland, that all during our time growing up, we both grew up in houses that would have been characterised as nationalist. We both grew up with an ambition that this country would one day be reconciled, but we also grew up knowing that our neighbours regarded that as highly subversive. Evidence that, you know, we were outsiders, always to be the strangers. Now that ambition is respected. It is given its place inside the Good Friday Agreement, and the people of Northern Ireland have been told, if at any time you decide you want to withdraw from the United Kingdom, if you want to create a new all-island, United Ireland, call it whatever, by whatever name you want, then that option will be available. And for us, that seems to be an extraordinary thing, to have moved from a time when that was regarded as so outlandish by our neighbours, to a time when they accept that as part of the parity of esteem deal, giving us something to work towards, something to be proud of, a vision, an ashling for our future. Not in the context of a win and lose situation, which would have been the context of the past. The winner takes all and the loser goes away and nurses his or her grievances, overwhelmed by failure, and plans revenge in the long grass, but rather something to work for, so that we would have a win-win situation where everybody could sign up happily and with a heart and a hand to a new dispensation. That's, well, it'll be your generation who will drive those kinds of arguments and who would have and hold those kinds of opinions, which will in turn, in time, change the shape of politics and of life's experience on this island. And the challenge for your generation is to sustain and to consolidate this hard-won prize of peace with no less hope and no less determination than was invested in the creation of it. I think of the past couple of weeks, we have arrived at a moment in our history that kind of almost passed us by. But I don't know if you noticed, but the longest period of power-sharing government in Northern Ireland came to a gentle, natural end when its time simply ran out. You know, it came to its the natural end of its term of office. Normally, it ended when people ran out, shouting and roaring at each other and fragmenting and breaking and all sorts of political drama, and it would take forever and a day to bring all the little pieces back together again. Not this time. Not this time. The first time since we've had power sharing, and the first time in the history of Northern Ireland that we've had this sustained period of government, remarkably given that in that government we have all the political parties, but in particular we have the Reverend Ian Paisley's Democratic Unionist Party and Sinn Féin working well together in government. These are things that would have seemed impossible just a short few years ago. It creates an opportunity for a historic set of new relationships. These relationships are growing. They're no longer completely embryonic, incidentally. I mean, they've gone beyond being little seeds. I think they're pretty robust plants now. But like all robust plants, they still need the rain, they still need the nurturing, they still need the good gardeners. We need you to be the good gardeners. You know, no one's life was ever made miserable by having good neighbours. And that's the simple truth of it. But our lives on this island have been made miserable by not being good neighbours to one another. And so our future well-being, you know, lies in the investment we make in being good neighbours to each other and in inculcating a culture of good neighbourliness, so that that peace, that increasingly robust plant can grow to its fullest potential, reveal what it's capable of. I don't even know what it's capable of standing here now. I know what the absence of peace was capable of. I just have to look back at the landscape of my own life and the lives of people that I knew well. I can look at the 3,500 people who died, quite a number of whom I knew. I came from the parish with the highest per capita incidence of murders. I look at the violence that we both experienced in our own homes. I look at just the devastating landscape of misery and loss. So I have absolutely no doubt in my own mind, it could not be any worse. The landscape of peace has got to be better than the landscape of its absence. And that's the landscape that will reveal itself, with you giving it the heft, the push, the momentum, and in particular, never complacency, never to grow complacent about this peace, because complacency is the toxin, the toxic spores that I spoke of at the beginning. They love complacency. That is gruel to them, that is feed to them. When people think it's all over and they don't have to work anymore, they don't have to build the peace, they don't have to worry about gender consciousness, they don't have to worry about gay rights, they don't have to, as soon as you take your eye off that ball, the toxic spores just start their work all over again. And this peace was built by people who knew that, because they had so much experience of going one step forward and 2 steps backwards. Now, thankfully, the mathematics are quite different. Now we go 2 steps forward. We used to actually go 2 steps forward and 1 step back, which even me as a lawyer, I can figure out mathematically that's an advance. Thing, isn't it? It is, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it used to be until the banks, anyway. But, so we're going forward, and now I think we don't go 1 step backwards. Now I think the momentum is extra. I don't know if you have intuited this, those of you who didn't grow up in those gorgeous years when politics in Northern Ireland were conducted, with all the dignity of bulls and china shops, when people roared abuse at each other, when dreadful things were said, hurtful, awful, raw, raucous, nasty, mean, the kind of things that kept things raw, the kind of things that kept people agitated. Now the language of political debate has become so much more temperate, and it's interesting to hear it, because you can hear in the language that is being used now, language that is designed to open up possibilities for reconciliation, for consensus building, rather than in the past, language that was designed to man the barricades, to police the lines that were never in the sand in Northern Ireland, believe you me, they were always in the cement. At least if they were in the sand, you could hope for a wave that might take them away, but there were always lines in the cement. And that has changed. The language of engagement has changed. And that is because people do change. And one of the things that peacemakers always believed passionately and continue to believe is in the possibility that the word and the good idea can persuade people to change. That's something this society believes, and that's what you have debating societies for, because you believe that the power of words put together well, put together passionately, and put together in truth can change people's minds. And the peace was built by people who, like you, are not afraid to stand up and argue their case, not afraid to come and listen, don't think they know it all, are willing to open their ears and listen while other people tell them things that may help change their minds or form their minds. But people who believe, importantly, in the power of ideas, and blissfully in the power of good ideas. It's the season of change. We have a beautiful, beautiful spring. We have a new government with a very strong mandate, and it carries such hopes and ambitions for our people in terms of stabilising our economy, stabilising our finances, and creating opportunities for your generation so you can flourish where you want, at home if you want, wherever you want, but particularly if you want to flourish at home. We have so many problems to solve in our country. Life is very far from perfect. We have many problems to solve, but we have a huge team of problem solvers. People who are willing to be the people who create the momentum, create the heft that we need to get this country, whether it's back economically on its feet or to sustain the peace. And the peacemakers, this is the good news for those of you who are worried about the economy, the peacemakers have triumphed against, you think the odds are bad on the economy. Believe you me, the odds on the peace at times were atrocious. I see Michael D in the audience here, and you would know, Michael, you've been a long time at this game too. You know how often the odds were stacked against the peacemakers. You know how many times it all just seemed that, you might as well just close up right now and forget it and just hand the whole thing over to people who believed passionately in the absence of peace, because they always seemed to be able to overwhelm the work of the peacemakers, to drive people back into their bunkers. And yet, a day after that would happen, some awful atrocity that would just drive people back to saying the horrible things again and feeling the horrible raw hurts again. Suddenly, the peacemakers would get up 2 days later, having been absolutely drained to their last, and they'd say, you know what, we're not going to let them win. We're just not going to let them do it. And back they would come again. And even in their own families, in their own streets, in their own communities, they met all sorts of opposition. but they still said the word that for them was the truth. They got up, they shouted it, they said it quietly, they said it loud, and they provoked